Hi, David. Are you there? Hello, David. Hello. I can see you, but I don't hear you. You're muted. You're still muted. Hello, David. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm not sure. Jake and Keely. Hi.
Good morning.
Yeah. I'm looking. No, I think it's okay. You've got enough light in front of you. That the picture looks good.
If we need to add more light, we can.
Or adjust
No,
anything.
no, I'm seeing those louvered windows and behind you, and you might want to just shut those.
Shut those. Okay.
We can shut all those.
Yeah, that's better. It won't be so. Otherwise,
If
it's a
maybe I
little
can turn on that light right there. Does that help, or does that?
Yeah, I would shut that off.
Yeah, I thought so.
Good. That's better.
Yeah, that light looks good.
Yeah.
Good morning, Jake. Good morning. Nice to meet you, Keely.
Good morning. Nice to meet both of you.
Yeah.
Morning,
Thank you for
David.
being on. Thank you. It's nice to see your face. I saw your pictures. Oh, I do need a high-res picture of you. So when you can send that
Okay.
to me.
I sent one over yesterday. If
Okay.
that doesn't work, let me know.
Nope, that'll work fine.
Okay.
I will see that. So good. Yeah. So
who's 960 the Patriot?
That's producer Jeremy. How you doing?
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we have 25 minutes, 20 seconds, about halfway through. Bob will just do a station identification, if you will, and just remind listeners who they're listening to and what you've been talking about. Are we using your names?
Yeah, feel free to use Jake and Keely. I'd probably shy away from using our last names just with our travels and stuff.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Yes, of course. Yes. I think that's great.
Yeah, I have a little Alzheimer's, so I might forget.
Okay. Okay. No worries.
Okay. Do you have good levels, Jeremy?
Yeah, you all three, you sound perfect.
Okay. All right. I think we'll get rolling
and Jeremy, you'll give me the time frame. You'll let me know when it's.
Yeah, I'll write it in the chat so you'll just see it pop up on your screen.
Okay, great. I will open the chat so it's there. Great.
Okay, I think we're ready.
You got it. Here we go for 25 minutes and 20 seconds.
In addition to taking care of one another inside the church, what if we developed a lifestyle of taking care of the most needy outside the walls of the church? How would that change the community and our city? Bob Moffett, president and founder of Harvest Foundation in Phoenix, along with Pastor Julian Gibb, talked with pastors and leaders about how sacrificial love by those in the church to those in need outside the church has helped people see and embrace Jesus Christ. It's that demonstration of Jesus' greatest commandment that we'll hear more about today on the kingdom and its stories.
Welcome, everybody. We're delighted to have you with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, or in the night, whatever time you happen to be observing, listening, and watching our program. And so we welcome you, but we also want to welcome Jake and Keely, who are our guests today. And Jake and Keely, thank you for joining us. And just to remind our listeners, the whole point of this podcast, a radio broadcast, is to interview people who have allowed Jesus to use them as his hands and feet in the lives of others. Not so that we will copy exactly what you're doing, but that we can listen to your story and the Lord can use your story as an encouragement to us, as an inspiration for us to think more clearly about how we could better represent Jesus Christ in our world. So, welcome to the both of you. And as we get started, why don't you guys share the elevator speech of who you are? Who are you guys?
Yeah, well, thank you for having us on your program, Dr. Moffat. It's an honor to be here with you guys. So, or virtually, I guess I could say. Yeah, so my name is Jake. This is my lovely wife, Keely, as you said. We are from different parts of the country. I'll start off. I was born in Idaho and raised in Montana primarily. And after I went to high school, kind of grew up in a broken home, so to speak, and my parents divorced when I was young, so really just had kind of a challenging childhood. But it was my high school year in track practice. A buddy of mine was talking about youth group, and I was excited about it. I was like, this sounds amazing. So he invited me. Kind of began to hear about Jesus at that time, and was like, this is intriguing. And and the youth pastor kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, would you like to consider, following in the faith? And I was like, yes. So anyway, I kind of said the prayer, but I don't think I really truly grasped what it meant to follow Jesus till I was in my later 20s. And then, yeah, through God's providence, he really drew me into the kingdom. And I would say I was born again then. So yeah, we're now I'm in my 40s. My wife's coming up on her 40s, and we've got 3 lovely kids, and yeah, so it's a little bit about us.
Yeah, we've been married for almost 13 years.
Yep.
13 years coming up this fall, and it's been a life of adventure. The way the Lord has brought us together and really put us on mission for his purposes together, and it's been sharpening and humbling and everything in between. So,
well, yeah. You talk about mission. So what is the specific mission or calling that God has put on your lives?
Yeah, it's a good question. So back in 2005, I just really started asking God, what would you want to do with someone? What would you want to do with my life? What could I truly do to serve you? And felt like he was actually leading me to just kind of learn what my spiritual gifts were. And so I took the spiritual giftings test and took a class at the church I was at, and it leaned towards missions and faith and apostle, and I was like, well, what does all this mean? And they're like, well, you need to go meet this guy. And so I met this dear, who's now still a dear friend of mine. This is almost 20 years or so ago. And he began to just disciple me, pour into me, share about God's heart for the nations. And through that, he encouraged me to take this class called Perspectives. And so I took Perspectives and was like blown away. Wow. I heard about God's heart from Genesis to Revelation. And so anyway.
Yeah. And our heart really is to live on mission for the Lord and do that in a way that it's not boxed in, but it's everything. It's everything we do, not just with each other, but with our children and also with our community, that we really try and foster. And that the key part of that here is where we're at, is to reach internationals in the nations that are really coming here to Arizona and the Phoenix area. And that's really our heart beat, because that the Lord he's bringing them here. All the nations are really coming here.
Tell me, how do you, I understand Phoenix is hot since I lived there 40 years.
Yeah.
So how do you brave the heat to get out of your house um, to uh, uh, to minister to these internationals? And how do you do that? What specifically? How do you do outreach to internationals in Phoenix?
It's a great question. I'll just kind of say, God led us to buy a house where a lot of internationals live. So in Tempe, we're right across the street from Arizona State University. And they
Okay,
call it the Tempe 1040 window, which is kind of a fun moniker. For those that don't
great.
know,
Yeah,
1040 window is that window, if you will, across the world where the remaining unreached, unengaged people, or I think it's like 80% of the remaining unreached, unengaged people groups live. Well, ASU has about 15,000 international students, and many of them are coming from this 1040 window, if you will.
that's the size of a Midwestern city where you guys grew up.
Yeah,
Just the international side of it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we purposely are kind of incarnated amongst them. So across the street, we've had Pakistani neighbors and Chinese neighbors and Saudi neighbors and
Afghan neighbors.
yeah, Afghan neighbors and
Indian. Yeah.
Indian.
I
So
mean, a lot of different ones.
Okay, well, it's one thing to have neighbors.
Yeah.
How do you go beyond? How do you acknowledge them as neighbors, and how do you go beyond that?
Yeah. Well, I'll just give you a quick little story or an example that happened last year. Is
Okay.
obviously we have 3 kids, and they're in the public school system here because we feel that's the best way for them, our own children, to be discipled and learn how to minister to the lost as well. And I was standing at the bus stop trying to put the kids on the bus, and there was a fully covered woman standing at the bus stop. So I just said hello, introduced myself, said, "Are you new? How can I help you? Because you don't look familiar here. Can we trade numbers?" And we just hit off a friendship. So it's really trying just to be a good neighbor the way that the Lord has called us to, by introducing yourself and saying, "How can I help you? This doesn't look like it's a familiar place to you, but it is to me. So how can I help you establish yourself or learn the rhythms of life
Right.
here?
Right.
And can we be friends?"
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great. And do you still, I mean, did that go somewhere? Did she?
Yeah. So this woman was getting her master's in education for a whole year here at ASU, and she had her 4 children with her. And obviously from a very conservative Muslim country, Saudi Arabia. And yes, it went really well. Our children became friends. They rode the bus
Wow.
together. We had tea times together. When her husband came to visit, my husband became very good friends with her husband. I helped teach her how to drive, which was
Wow.
scary sometimes. And so these are just little things we do. Like even my husband, he helps some of the men, the international men he makes friends with. He teaches them how to drive, or brings them places, or helps them with paperwork. All these like mundane things that we think, but they really do need help with. And it really can show the love of Jesus and lead into spiritual conversations with these people.
So you said that your children got to meet her children,
Yeah.
and are they friends? Do they continue to interact with each other?
So yeah, this particular family has gone back to their home country. So, but we still communicate via WhatsApp. But yeah, our children have had many friends with their international children. This last year too, they had some Pakistani friends who we hosted, and we taught them different traditions around the holidays, and to expose them to different things. And they still talk with them or say WhatsApp with them. WhatsApp is really big with a lot of internationals, so that tends to be the platform if they move away or move somewhere else, to really continue to foster these relationships.
I'm really impressed with the idea that this isn't just for the 2 of you; it's for your kids too.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a family ministry.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we really believe it's important to raise them up and help them to see, like, reaching out to the nations that are here and welcoming them and befriending them is super, important for us to make sure that they're being involved in the ministry as well.
All right, Jake. Tell me a story or two, that illustrates the long-term impact of your befriending international folks.
Yeah, that's a great one. So I'd say one of the stories that helps kind of paint the picture of the long-term effect is back in 2016, I got connected to this gentleman, who's an international student from Muslim majority country in the Middle East. And he expressed interest in the faith. And I hadn't even really gotten to know him. I just kind of got connected to him through some different circumstances. And anyway, I just said, hey, I'd love to start a Bible study with you. I want you to understand what you're really getting into. And we set up a time to meet the very next day, and he didn't show up. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I thought, maybe, did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? I started kind of playing the story in my own mind.
Yeah.
And so I texted him back and called him, no answer. But about 4 or 5 months later, out of the blue, he calls me up and just says, hey, I'm so sorry for not showing up to our appointment. He says, I really had to count the cost of what this decision meant. He said, over the Christmas break, I flew my parents from the country where they live to a different country so I could begin to tell them about my decision that I want to begin to follow Jesus. He said, really, it was just, I was counting the cost. He didn't say those words, but that's essentially what he was trying to tell me.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And so I said, okay, well, let's, he says, I'm ready to start studying the Bible. And, oh, by the way, I do want to mention that his parents were okay with him in this decision. Yeah, which is really it was encouraging for me.
Yeah.
We started studying the Bible. He said yes to Jesus. I baptized him, began to disciple him. He started to come to church. He ended up graduating with ASU with a health sciences degree. He wants to be a dentist. And check this out. He just recently got offered a full ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore.
You're kidding. Wow.
So he's actually on his way. In just a few days, he'll actually be traveling to Baltimore to go live out his dream of getting his master's degree. And he's just an amazing kid. I mean, the circumstances I could go into more details of some of the things that he's been through. It's been really challenging. In fact, he was just at our house last night, kind of saying goodbye. But this was like a 6 or 7 year journey of helping him and seeing him get established in the faith.
So you're saying, Jake, that this isn't something that happens overnight?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm saying it, and I just want to say discipleship is messy. There's been so many times where I just got frustrated and I wanted to, but I had to just love him where he was at, because I had to recognize he comes from a strongly Muslim background. And I had to just love him where he was at and not condemn him by any means. Sometimes as Christians, I think we can be a little bit harsher on the younger generation, if you will. And it's like, no, we gotta handle them with kid gloves. He's new into this culture. He's new into the faith. And so just walking with them was. So there's challenges involved for sure, but it's so worth it.
So from what you're saying, I see 2 key principles here. One is not being judgmental, not looking at it from at the relationship from our perspective and saying, well, that's not acceptable. It's being willing to be understanding and flexible.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I've picked up from the 2 of you is time. This isn't something, the process of helping people to encounter Jesus is not something that happens, especially when they're coming from a background where they would have rejected Jesus at first glance.
Yeah.
It takes patience and time.
It really does. It's almost like God wants to teach us a lot in the journey. We sometimes think that it's all about us teaching them, but it's like God's saying, no, I want to teach you a lot in this journey too. I want you to grow in your faith too.
So what if you don't have a lot of time? You just meet somebody at the airport, or like you did, Keely, you met this lady at the bus stop where she was putting her kids on the bus. What if we don't know that we have a lot of time to invest?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think being open to the Holy Spirit's leading too, and how he wants you to have certain conversations with these people based upon the time that you're given is really, really important. And I do believe he gives you time as long as you're willing to sacrifice some of your fleshly desires to push into that time. So 'cause
Right.
sometimes it's not convenient for you, and you're like, well, I'm on a schedule. But then sometimes you have to be like, well, that schedule has to fall by the wayside because the Lord's prompting me to stay longer, or
Okay.
to sacrifice sleep, or to push out something that you already had planned that afternoon because that's what he's calling you to do. So you have to be willing to have this flexibility. And I would just say to die to your flesh in a lot of ways,
Right.
which is difficult and hard. Totally. I sometimes have arguments in my head with the Holy Spirit about like, no, I don't want to do that today. And then he's like, no, you need to do that. Okay, I'll do that.
Just remind our listeners that you're listening and or watching to the Kingdom and its Stories. And in this broadcast, we interview people who can help us maybe rethink what we're doing and how we're living in order to better be Jesus' hands and feet in our lives, no matter what our vocation is. But just to think, okay, this is who I am. Father, how do you want me to represent you among the people I meet? And there may be people just standing at the bus stop. And I can remember meeting a covered lady one time she came and sat on the same bench I was with her little boy. And her little boy and I bonded. He must have been 4 or 5 years old, and he just wanted to spend time with me. And she was embarrassed that he was bothering me, and I just said, no, this is fine. And I had some time between flights, and we just really, I have no idea how the Lord will use that. But she didn't speak much English, and the little boy his language ability wasn't all that good yet, but we just bonded. And rather than getting up and going, because he was kind of climbing all over me, and she was embarrassed. And I said, no, this is perfectly okay. But I thought, Lord, this is an opportunity. I don't know what you'll do with it, because I'll never see them again, probably. But maybe this can be part of what you're doing in their lives to introduce them to you. So thank you for being with us, both of you. Question: Are you guys doing this full time? Do you work, or do you have another vocation?
I did have another vocation for many years. I was a trauma nurse, actually, at the hospital up in Scottsdale Osborne. So I did that for a number of years, and then just over a series of just months and years, it just felt like God was kind of leading me into full-time ministry. So we actually do this full-time out of our house. Part of our vocation is to actually train up long-term workers who are actually willing to move overseas. Mm-hmm. So we run a training program called Launch, and that helps equip and train up and send long-term workers to the nations. My wife and I lived in North Africa for a season of life, and so now God's, through some different providential reasons, God's brought us back, and now we're kind of in the phase of equipping others and helping to send.
Well, tell us about Launch. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'll jump in and share just a little bit, and then Keely can jump in and share on. So she helps oversee the women that go through Launch. I help oversee the men. So it's a 9-month training equipping program. We start in August and we go till May. Part of the training is actually to move down into the community here. So we've had, I don't know, anywhere from 60 to 70 people now, including children, that's moved down either from other states to come through our training, or that's moved from the suburbs here of the Phoenix area to.
Is this full-time or part-time training?
Yeah, so the training itself is it's about a 15, I tell people it's about a 15 to 18 hour a week commitment. And of course, just like anything in life, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. But at least the very minimum is 15 to 18 hours. But we ask you to do this in conjunction with a full-time job, or being a full-time student, or a
Okay.
combination of the two,
Or a mom.
or a full-time mom.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
You mean that's a full-time job?
Yeah, yeah. So it really is. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, we like to have them work or have the other rhythms of life. To, like we said, for us, this is a way of life. So part of that equipping and training to go long-term overseas is also to learn how to establish these rhythms of life. And like, how am I a mom, but I'm also on mission, and how do I help disciple my children while I try to introduce others to Jesus and disciple others? You can do it all. You don't have to have these little boxes. So yeah, it's really sweet.
So do I get the implication that no matter what you're doing, like being a trauma nurse, that you should also be on mission?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And that's really, in a lot of ways, what we're training people to do. Is many people that go through our training we've had doctors. Last year we had 3 physicians go through our training. We've had nurses and teachers. And the goal is really to help them to implement the kingdom values into their all of life.
Okay.
So that they're not compartmentalizing, I'm going to work, so now I take off my Jesus hat. No, we want you to bring the gospel wherever you're going. And so
Can you tell us a story that illustrates how some of the people that you've trained have moved into seeing that they need to be on mission, whether or not no matter what their vocation is?
Yeah, I can share a story of a gentleman that we just recently sent to North Africa. This is a gentleman in his early 60s. He's a grandpa. He was recently widowed about 4 or 5 years ago. His wife passed away. So he really just felt the calling of the Lord on his life for years, actually. And through just some different conversations, he felt encouraged to move down to Tempe. He sold his house in Gilbert, moved down into Tempe, lived in our kind of community where there's thousands of international students, learned how to share the gospel with, internationals and so forth. And then just recently, about 6 months or so ago, launched into, like I say, into North Africa. So, and he's thriving, he's doing well, he's learning the language. So this training is really for many different age groups. And the reason I kind of picked him is he was one of the first ones that came to my mind. And so
Wow.
Really encouraging guy, really sharp. And
Yeah, praise the Lord. Jake and Keely, thank you so much for your willingness to share with us today, and to share with us the idea that it doesn't matter what our vocation is or how old we are, but it could even be a grandpa in their 60s. And we need to realize that God has called us to be on mission. And so I just really appreciate your willingness to be with us today and to share your stories with us. And may the Lord bless you as you continue not only being Jesus' hands and feet, but training others to do the same. May God bless you.
Thank you.
And may those of us who are listening realize that we need to consider how we can better be Jesus' hands and feet.
Amen. We agree with that. Thank you for having us on your program. It's
Thank you.
really an honor for us.
Thank you.
And you're clear. Perfect.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you,
Got
Jeremy.
it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you again.
Yeah, it was really nice to
Thank
meet you,
you.
Dr. Moffat and
Such-
David. It's good to see you in
Yeah,
on
nice
the
to meet
screen
you
there.
both.
And, yeah,
Yes,
Thank you so
I'll
much.
s-
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
I'm
yeah.
going to send you a link that shows the date. This is about 4 weeks out, so you can share that if you'd like. So thank you very much for being on. Yeah, really nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God
Thank
bless,
you, Dr.
guys.
Okay.
Have a
You
great
too,
day.
David.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
Bye-bye. God bless.
bye. Bob, if you'll stay on, just we've got
Okay.
Andy
All right.
in the waiting area here, and I'll just let him in. There we go. We don't need to do any changes here, so. Morning, Andy. How are you?
Doing well.
Hey,
Good.
Andy.
Hi,
Good,
Bob. How you doing?
good to see you.
Too.
Not face to face, but almost.
That's right. Almost close enough.
Yeah, Zoom is amazing. I have about 10 what we call discipleship groups or micro groups in 10 different countries.
Wow.
And so it's amazing to be able to just meet people. And I feel like even though I've met these people in person at one time, but to continue and build a relationship this way is
Yeah,
it just the technology is truly amazing.
it is incredible.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Looking forward to it. The AC just kicked on. Is that going to be a problem? Should I kick it off?
Jeremy,
Jeremy, do you hear that? I can't hear it, but
I don't hear it either.
No, I'm not picking it up either.
I did. Only in Arizona would we even ask that question, but right,
Yeah,
it's so
well,
important.
I'm in Branson, Missouri at the moment. So
Okay. All right. Well, never mind.
What are you doing in Branson?
Well, my in-laws live in Springfield. And
Okay.
so we came for the week just to do everything Branson. So
Okay.
my dad pastored a church in Missouri. Like I grew up a little bit in Southeast Missouri. And so we would come here when I was a kid. And so to come back has been kind of fun. So.
Yeah. I grew up in LA, but
Oh, okay.
I have no desire to go back to LA.
No.
It's a completely different place than I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but anyway, thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
being
this
with us.
opportunity. Yeah.
So Jeremy, if our sound is good, we're ready to go.
Got it. Here we go. 25 minutes and 15 seconds.
In addition to taking care of one another inside the church, what if we developed a lifestyle of taking care of the most needy outside the walls of the church? How would that change the community and our city? Bob Moffat, president and founder of Harvest Foundation in Phoenix, along with Pastor Julian Gibb, talk with pastors and leaders about how sacrificial love by those in the church to those in need outside the church has helped people see and embrace Jesus Christ. It's that demonstration of Jesus' greatest commandment that we'll hear more about today on the kingdom and its stories.
Welcome to those of you who are listening and or watching at whatever time of the 24-hour day you happen to be listening and watching us. Welcome. We're delighted to have you with us in this program called The Kingdom and Its Stories. And in this broadcast, we interview people just like you who have learned and are continuing to learn what it means to be Jesus' hands and feet, to be on mission, no matter what our calling is, what our vocation is. And today we have Andy Myers with us, who's our guest. And Andy, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Bob. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you with us. Now, tell us, what's the elevator speech of who Andy Myers is? So
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I came to faith at a very young age. I asked Jesus into my heart at 4. And I remember actually that day. And my dad was a pastor, grew up at the church. I was baptized at age 8. I went into ministry at around 21 and I worked in pastoral ministry, missions, nonprofits, and other aspects of ministry. And I love serving God's people, love serving the church, and have really kind of landed, I think, onto what my calling is in life.
How long did it take you, Andy, to get there, to that calling in life?
Oh my goodness. Probably a good 15, 20 years. I never really quite fit the mold of like traditional church work, traditional church ministry, and felt God's leading to the marginalized everywhere I turned. And it's a place where it's uncomfortable, and yet I find great grace in that space.
Wow. I love that. So you don't have to know what the calling is right now. Be patient. And it sounds like, by implication of your story, that the Holy Spirit will work in your life to bring you to that place. Is that right?
That's right. Well, God's direction to Abraham was not go here, there. He just said, walk. And when you get there, I'll let you know. And so that's kind of how I live my life. I just walk, and God says, here you are today.
Wow. Okay. Well, tell us, what is that calling?
So I work with an organization called the National Immigration Forum with the Evangelical Immigration Table. And what we are is a policy and advocacy group for refugees and immigrants. The moment you throw out that word immigration in our country today, all of a sudden people go here or here. I'm trying to get the Zoom parameters. It's bigger than that. It's become such a politically charged word, but Jesus calls us to the least of these. Jesus calls us to really understand who our neighbor is. So we work diligently with offices in Washington, D.C., as well as around the country, and working with pastors, church leaders, business leaders, law enforcement, border patrol, in order to understand the issue in immigration today and refugee crises, as well as work for policies that help to not only just have a better understanding of law, but also helping with understanding stories.
Well, you hit one of my favorite words, stories. And so we'll get to that in a minute. But right now, I want to deal with this thorny issue of the thousands of immigrants coming into our country, uninvited.
Yes.
Now, you know a lot of their stories. So what if we feel like, look, they weren't invited. They came illegally, we think, and they should go back to where they came from. But I'm a follower of Jesus, and I've got this tension in me. And I know that Jesus has a heart for refugees, but I'm not sure how I should respond to that. Help me, Andy.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. This is what I do on a daily basis. One of the first things that we have to go to is we have to go to the story of the Good Samaritan when they're asking Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus hits him with a zinger. We're all familiar with that story, probably everybody listening on this radio broadcast, but we don't realize sometimes the implication of what a zinger that was. In fact, if you remember at the end of that passage, they don't answer the Samaritan. They answer the one who helped him with their kind of heads down, and they kind of shrink away. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. So we have to start there, and we have to understand that sometimes, no matter what our political bent is, no matter what's going on in our world today, our first calling is to follow in the kingdom of God. So when Jesus asks that question of who is my neighbor, it is everybody. It is anybody.
So my first calling isn't as an American who's defensive about the borders of his country. My first calling is as a
citizen of the kingdom of God.
Okay.
But we also are a nation of laws and rule. And one of the frustrating things about our work in immigration is we have not had any significant reform since gas was 93 cents a gallon.
That's a long time ago.
That's a long time. And so our world has changed. I mean, even thinking in the last 3 years since 2020, the fact that we're doing this Zoom today has just shown us how much our world has changed. And over the last 20, 25 years, our needs have grown. The refugee crisis has grown. People coming to seek, not just seek a better life in America, because that's kind of what our thing is. Oh, they just want jobs. They just want this. And actually, we have a lot of jobs for people to have right now. But a lot of them are fleeing violence in their countries. They're fleeing situations that they don't want their children to grow up in. And so they still view America as this beacon of hope. They still view America as those first coming, the ones who were coming on Ellis Island, who would hear, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. They still hear that. That sound still echoes through the world today. But our world has changed. And so we have to understand that we can develop a posture of welcoming, but we also need to work and advocate for laws and rule that help do it wisely. What does Jesus say? Be wise as serpents, as gentle as doves in our world. And sometimes the rhetoric on both sides is so loud that those of us in the 77% in the middle just kind of go, oh, that's too loud. I don't want to deal with it. And so we don't. And so in Congress, it gets passed off. In Congress, it gets pushed off. It's used as a political carrot during each election cycle.
Andy, help me in my mind and heart to understand what's it like. What was it that drew these people, from Central America? I mean, who are they? I mean, are they just looking for a better life, or? But I mean, if I need compassion for these people, I need to better understand who they are. Tell us, in a general sense or in a specific sense, if you want to, what is it that drives these people to go from Venezuela?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is an incredible journey.
Mm-hmm.
Not by plane. Some of them walk. I can't get my mind around that. What in the world drove them to do that?
Well, I'll give you a few stories from different countries of folks that I've met. I've had the privilege to go to Nogales, which is just 2.5 hours south of Phoenix. The border is literally not just in our backyard, it's in our front yard. And working right across the border there, visiting a place called the Kino Border Initiative. And the Kino Border Initiative is actually run by a group of Catholic Jesuits who are a welcoming center on the Mexican side for folks that find themselves at the border and have to go back. I met a man named Hector there. I've changed some names. So I met a man named Hector who is from the Acapulco area. And his job, he just had a normal job raising his family. His job was to drive fish from the port to another community a couple hours away every day. And that was his job. Get up, go early, pick up the fish, drive it. Along the highway one day, he gets stopped by a drug cartel. And the drug cartel tells him, hey, we're going to give you 30 days to consider that you're going to be hauling drugs for us as well as fish. Hector didn't want to do that because Hector is a follower of Jesus. Hector loves his children and his family and knows the destruction that drugs bring to a community. So Hector says no. They said, well, we didn't really give you the opportunity to say no. You have 30 days or we're going to find you. So Hector keeps going on his route. Sure enough, a month later, they pick him up. They beat him. They leave him for dead in a canyon off the side of the road. And somebody happened to come by, saw him out there. They were walking through the area there.
It was like the Good Samaritan story.
It does, yeah. It's very, very similar when I heard it. And they take him back to his house. Well, he can't live there. They know where he lives. So he decides to go to another city 3 hours away and start a new life. His first thought was not like, okay, hey, I'm going to go to Mexico. I'm going to go to the US. His first thought was, I'm just going to go start over somewhere else. I can get a job. So his brother had a construction job for him 3 hours away. He goes there with his family, wife and kids, and they get a little apartment. He starts working. A couple months later, he was walking with a friend down the road, and a police car pulls up next to them and just is driving slowly with them. And then they take off. So next thing you know, his brother is frantically trying to get a hold of him, saying, hey, they found out where you live. You have to go now. So he picks up his wife, family, and then they head across all of Mexico up to our border to claim asylum. Now, here's what some folks don't understand, is that we just think that people are coming willy-nilly, and if they get into our country, it's a free-for-all. There is one really credible legal way for folks to enter our country today, right now, as the laws stand, who are poor or don't have the means to hire lawyers for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that is to have a credible asylum claim. So they can cross into U.S. territory, since at Title 42, they had to kind of encounter it right before.
Right.
Title 42 is over. They can cross into U.S. territory and surrender to the CBP agent. Say, hands up. I've actually watched this happen. And then the officers take them into an interview space. And if they can establish a credible threat, much like Hector's story, or even probably more, because he didn't actually make it, then they're able to be in our country. Even they can work at some points along the way, until they're hearing, and until they're hearing in front of a judge about their asylum case. So that's the hope for these folks fleeing violence. And sometimes we say, well, why don't they just go back home? Why don't they just do this? Why don't they just do that? So I like to put myself in their position. I'm a dad. I have 4 kids. I would do anything for my kids' safety. And you think about putting yourself in the most uncomfortable place. Like, I love the comforts that I live in at home. Well, other cultures experience comfort. Like, they know their food, they know their culture, they know their families. And so to make this choice where they have to now uproot everything they know and flee,
Right.
that is a crisis. And so if I put myself in their place and they have a credible story and everything checks out, my compassion has to reach beyond, like, well, are they going to come in? Who's coming? That kind of talk. So I think when we get there, we can get to the mind of Jesus. Like Jesus said, when he was in the Sermon of the Mount, he looked out on the crowds and it said he had compassion for them.
Right.
And that compassion in the Greek means to agonize with.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we feel bad for folks, but how do we get to that mind of Jesus where we're like agonizing with them? And at some way we can put ourselves in their shoes and go, okay, now we've got to fix some things. And that's where it gets sticky, because politicians don't live in immigration every day. They've got a million things to think about. And when this pops up on the radar, it's usually the rhetoric that they hear. But I believe that as the church, much like my brothers and sisters down in Nogales, working with folks on the other side, we can, as churches, begin to tell a different story and a different narrative, and help our law makers to understand our perspective. That's how representative government gets done, right?
Right. Well, it's supposed to work that way.
Supposed to work that way, yeah.
Andy, I need to just break in here to do a station break. For those of you who are listening and are watching, you're listening to The Kingdom and Its Stories, where we interview brothers and sisters who are allowing Jesus to use them as his hands and feet, no matter what their vocation is, but saying, Lord, use me to be your hands and feet to the hurting that I encounter in my journey. So welcome to The Kingdom and Its Stories again. And we're interviewing Andy Myers, who is allowing his hands and feet to be Jesus' hands and feet. And he's talking to us about immigration and those refugees who come across our southern border And it's a very sticky political issue in our country at this point in time. And Andy's trying to help us to understand what it means from the perspective of those who immigrate. Why would they make the trek and the journey? Why would they make the decision to undergo this incredible pilgrimage at great risk to come to our border and seek asylum? Andy, you were telling me when I spoke with you yesterday or a day before that many of those who come across our border are followers of Christ. Tell us about that.
Sure. I don't have the exact statistic, and I thought I did, but I did not. It's a high number of, especially the families, the women and children that are fleeing violence in Guatemala, El Salvador, southern Mexico, are followers of Jesus. And they do, and specifically evangelicals, those areas have a high evangelical concentration. And so one of the motivators for them is when a cartel moves into their neighborhood, they want to recruit their children for gang work and to
wait a minute.
Mhm.
You're saying the cartels come into a neighborhood
Yeah.
and they recruit children?
Without a choice.
What just unpack that?
Yeah. So they'll go around and knock on your door, and they'll go into poor neighborhoods where a lot of maybe people need jobs, maybe people need work, and basically conscript them into service of the cartel, saying this is what you're going to do now. And we'll
They
pay
don't
you
invite them. This is what you're going to do.
what you're going to do now. And we'll pay you if you do it. If you don't do it, we'll kill you. And so story of Maria and her 3 small children that were coming of this age. She lived in southern Mexico, and she remembers the night that bullets were zinging through her wooden house. Imagine that.
Okay.
Bullets zinging through her wooden house. So she and her children escaped to the only concrete building in their community, which was a church. And the priest hid them in the church until another friend was able to take them on their long walk and treacherous journey up to the border. And she fled because she did not want her children involved in this kind of activity. And secondly, because she feared for her life. And so we start to understand these choices that these parents have to.
Andy, wait, let me back up. Why were the bullets flying through her house? Were they being aimed at her house?
No,
As a
they were
threat, or
they were in there was a rival gang war that had like a skirmish that had broken out in her neighborhood about a cartel wanting to take over that neighborhood.
okay?
And in doing so, then the kids that live there and the people that live there then have to start working for them. It's horrific.
Have to start.
Have to start.
Not a choice.
Not a choice.
Unless you leave.
Unless you leave.
Unless you can escape.
So being someone who loves Jesus and loves her children, that's not a choice that she's going to make for them to stay. And being somebody who is, I would consider, very courageous to make that journey, because along the way, there's extortion, there's danger, there's threats of death, there's like, it's an arduous journey. Like another story is I met a young Venezuelan man who had made it to the United States, and he fled Venezuela. And Venezuela is actually one of the countries that get an automatic asylum case because of the nature of their government currently.
Yes.
But they still don't, it's not like free tickets are dropping out of the sky for Venezuelans there. They have to get here somehow. And with the little money he had, he was able to go to Colombia and then walk all the way from Colombia up through Mexico. It took him over a year in order to.
What?
Yeah, took him a year. And he told me about, he was robbed along the way. There was one part of the jungle, it's called the Darien Gap, through the jungles of Colombia, where they have to pay people to take them through for safety. Like this is This is happening in our world today.
So,
And another thing, it's kind of like, it has like, our apprehensions at the border have slowed down significantly in the last 2 months. Everybody thought that once Title 42 ended, we'd see this grounds, like a huge influx, and it's actually dropped. I think yesterday it was 600 apprehensions in the month of.
and why is it dropped?
So there's always different factors. Some of them, like a lot of our officials have been working with those countries in order to help folks get better protections in their home. So some
Okay.
of that has started to work. It's hot, so the time of year does kind of dictate the number of people coming through. Sometimes they'll remain in a more temperate climate for a while they make their way. So there's just a lot of different factors.
So it took your friend from Venezuela
Yeah,
a year.
a year. Mm-hmm. And when he got here, there was a church. Again, like, we all want to be around people who understand us, speak our language, know our food, things like that. So a wonderful Hispanic church in the greater Phoenix area was able to help him because he was connected with somebody there. And so
So he did get across the border because he was Venezuelan.
So he
And he was granted
asylum.
asylum. Yeah. Okay. So tell us his story. So how did he get to this church in Phoenix?
So he had a friend that was there that he had met, and it was like a friend of a friend. And so he was able to just come up and connect with his friend. And then the church was able to get him some work, get him a little place to live with one of the families while he waits out his hearing. So.
Okay. Wow.
Stories, Bob.
I'm a pretty adventurous kind of guy. I just, it's hard for me to imagine a year's journey on foot from Venezuela to the border.
One more quick story. One of our common thinking is they're all coming from Central and South America. Well, we work with a group in Tucson called Casa Elitas, and they're a welcoming center. And so when folks get picked up by CBP and ICE, they are brought there while they're, to go to other places of the country. 95% of all of the single men coming through that welcoming center are from South India and Mauritania.
What?
Yeah, from South India and Mauritania. Most of them are Sikhs from southern India that are right now experiencing religious persecution. And they are now, like one man, he wasn't there when I met his friend, but the people at the center told me he had gone from South India to Dubai, and then from Dubai had walked and driven by car, bus, and camel over to the western coast of Africa, where he hopped on a plane to go to Colombia, and then began his journey of walking.
Oh man.
Yeah.
When you realize this kind of background, it sort of we need to put ourselves in those people's position and ask the Lord, help us to have compassion on those folks. Thank you, Andy Myers, for sharing with us today. And it's been an inspiration just to listen. And I want to encourage our folks to use these stories to help us better be Jesus' hands and feet today. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dave.
Perfect. You're clear.
Wow, Andy. Those are amazing stories.
I had so much more to say.
I know you do. We might need to have you back in a few weeks just because, Bob, if you're open to that, but that I just think there's about 20 more stories or 200 or 2,000 that you could distill. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd like to get into the what now, okay, I know this, now what do I do? So I can send you some links if you wanted to add it into the broadcast.
Yeah, I definitely want a website link or, maybe one, if there's one primary one, that would be really helpful.
Okay. I'll probably send you the evangelical immigration table, because what they have there is it's kind of like a launching point with like Bible studies, 40 days of scripture reading about immigrants. Like when you go back through the biblical narrative, you learn like the majority of our heroes at some point were refugees, including Jesus. So I like to include that in, and then give them some tangible ways to think and pray. And unfortunately it's frustrating because you get this like I said, the 10% on each side, they're just loud and angry. So I tend to think, look, I've come to the conclusion of we don't have a political spectrum any longer. It's like a circle, and the bottom 10% are so close and yet so mad at each other, and the rest of us are just like, can't we just get something done? There's a Lifeway Research did a study last year, and 78% of all evangelical Christians believe in immigration reform, as well as that also has security with it as well. And so that's what we're looking, is the both and that's up from 61% 3 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's like a 112-page slide deck that you don't have. Whatever.
well,
Andy, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
great. I will send you a thank you and a link to your show, which will be on sometime in the next few weeks. So if you
Awesome.
if you would like to share that, that'd be great. I would like to have you back,
Okay.
because
thank you.
I'd love to talk more about the 78% and the, like you said, what now. I think it'd be really helpful. Bob, would that be good?
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys,
All right, Andy, we'll talk
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bob, I'll call you later today. Our next guest is in. Can I give you, do you have 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I have 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm sending an invoice. We were at that second segment for the documentary, so I'm going to send an invoice today for that. And then I don't know if you responded to my WhatsApp. Somehow or another, you're not getting my my emails, and that's okay. I'll just use WhatsApp. But I'd sent that question about getting some more grant places from a paid database.
Yeah. I responded to that.
Oh, you did? Let's
did.
see. What did you say? Can you tell?
I
Oh,
said, that's really Julian's decision.
okay.
And so
Okay. All right.
I've asked him, but I haven't
Okay.
heard back.
Okay, great. Oh, I see. Do you want to wait to hear back from him then? Is that what
Yeah.
you're?
Yeah, I
Okay.
need to hear back from him.
The one thing to consider is that both of us could use it. Julian's side with Joe, and then my side with the documentary. It's all for Harvest, right? But it would benefit the whole organization. So, all right, we'll talk soon. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
interesting, huh? It's so interesting, wasn't it? I mean, both of those guys,
Yeah,
so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep getting some more. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.